What if entrepreneurs had an army of intelligent digital assistants behind them? What could they achieve? What could 100,000 entrepreneurs, each with 100 of these cognitive digital assistants, achieve? Let's find out.
This is the Economics for Business podcast. We're here to help all businesses become champions for customers and value, improving lives with preferred and innovative products and services. We offer you the knowledge and tools to make your entrepreneurial journey a successful one. Now, here's your host, Hunter Hastings.
Hi, Hunter Hastings here. Today we will raise your entrepreneurial aspirations. One of the theories of entrepreneurship, the one the academics call effectuation, pictures entrepreneurial businesses starting from a highly constrained perspective, limited by who you know today, what you know today, and the resources you command today. From these, entrepreneurs assemble the components of a commercial business, with the emphasis on constraints, constrained networks, incomplete knowledge, and limited resources. What if those constraints were lifted or loosened? How is that going to happen? We'll find out today that the lifting of constraints will occur, and in fact is occurring, in smart systems called service systems. The systems are made smart by adding technological capabilities, especially in the form of what is being called artificial intelligence. Not only that, these new entrepreneurial systems will become not only smart, but wise. To achieve their goals, they'll use less material and less time, and they'll think through the long-term consequences and effects of every choice and every decision. They'll be ethical. Our guide to this future world of cognitively assisted entrepreneurship is Jim Spohrer. Jim is a uniquely accomplished individual in the world of smart systems. He has a PhD in a combination of computer science, artificial intelligence, and cognitive science, as well as a degree in physics from MIT. He was a distinguished scientist in learning research at Apple Computer. He then moved to IBM, where he is director of IBM research at the Augmented Research Lab. And he currently heads up cognitive systems and cognitive open tech. He is also founding member at the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals, pronounced ISIP, and sits on the board of directors there. And he invented and cultivated an entire new science we call service science. What an honor to greet such a distinguished and accomplished guest. Jim, welcome to the Economics for Business podcast.
Thank you, Hunter. It's great to be here.
We operate in a service economy. That's well known. It's a globally interconnected service economy these days. It's the source of all value production. We all know that physical goods exist simply because they're enabling the consumption of the services they embody. And if I can misquote Mark Andreessen, services have eaten the economy. So we think of exchange now as service for service exchange. And there's a science behind all this, Jim, and you've been a leader in it. You established and developed and you continue to advance service science. It's a recognized area of research and technology, but it didn't even exist 20 years ago. So we're going to explore it a little bit today from your viewpoint, and we'll try and help entrepreneurs and businesses to embrace it a little bit. So maybe we can do an origin story. Where did it all start, and how did you get involved with it?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Hunter. The origin story of service science. Well, it's documented on the web under IBM's Icons of Progress because it was celebrated by IBM in our centennial year. So some people might want to go out and look at the IBM Icon of Progress for service science. But I think, to relate it to your audience, who I know are business people and entrepreneurs, sooner or later, most businesses face a revenue growth problem. And that revenue growth problem hit IBM hard in the early 1990s. And, the mainframe sales were slowing, revenue was dropping off, and Lou Gerstner came into IBM to basically save the company. And in saving the company, he transformed the company. So instead of getting revenue primarily from hardware and software, IBM became a service giant. In fact, by the early 2000s, when Sam Palmisano took over IBM because of the the outsourcing business, technology outsourcing business that Gerstner had grown so successfully. I mean, IBM stock split several times during the 1990s. And basically, IBM had more than 50% of our revenue coming from service. And that is when I was asked by the head of IBM Research, Paul Horn at the time, and the head of Augmented Research at the time, Robert Morris. They said, look, we need to start understanding, service innovation as much as we understand hardware and software innovation at IBM. So I was very lucky to be tapped. I remember several of my colleagues said, you're unlucky because people have tried this before and failed. But I guess I was, really taking a different look at it, because what I realized is with service innovation, it's also not just technology innovation, it's business model innovation. And so just like IBM helped start computer science as a discipline in the 1940s and 50s, it helps to know your history. Mm-hmm. And I knew history. I knew IBM had started computer science. So I just started talking to people who had started an academic discipline saying, hey, look, we got to get better at service innovation. There's pieces of it here, like service marketing's great, service operations great, service computing's great, service design is great. Yeah, but we've got all these great separate things. How do we integrate them into a new discipline called service science? And that's exactly what we did. And it's recorded on the web as one of the icons of progress of IBM. It's one of the 100 icons for our centennial celebration.
Yeah. So I always remember the 2004 paper by Vargo and Lush called Evolving to a New Dominant Logic for Marketing. It's said to be groundbreaking because they specifically shifted from what they called a goods dominant logic, that economics and business was about developing and selling goods, to a service dominant logic, which was a different form of exchange. And it specifically included the idea of co-creation, that customers and service providers co-create value, which is an important concept for us. How does that all fit in on the academic side, Jim?
Well, it's great when a plan comes together, and I think your business and entrepreneur audience probably has felt both ways. Sometimes you're trying to roll a boulder uphill and nothing's coming together, and other times you're, my gosh, you've got the right idea at the right time, and everything just clicks. And fortunately for IBM, Vargo and Lush, Steve Vargo and Robert Lush, at the same time we were trying to start service science, they were proposing a new dominant logic. They also observed that we were kind of stuck in this product mentality, and the vast majority of the economy was already over on the service side. And so they really thought deeply about this and created service dominant logic. And so that was huge wind in our sail. We had a great, still to this day, we have a fantastic partnership with them. So at the same time that IBM was coming from a practical, we got to get better at service innovation, academics all over the world were starting to look at service through this new lens. And once you adopt that lens of service dominant logic, you really do look at the world differently. You look at a product not as just this physical thing, but you see the history of all the knowledge that went into it. I'm fond of saying, even when you look at like a doorknob, something is, how many times a day do we touch a doorknob? Mm-hmm. But don't think of it as a product anymore. Think of it as like all the different types of doorknobs, all those different designs, all those different people, all of the maintenance of, what do you do when a doorknob breaks, So there's all that design, there's all that maintenance, there's all that cleaning. How do you clean different types of doorknobs? So when you start looking at the world through the service dominant lens and through the service science lens, you really start seeing it differently. And that way of looking at the world is what opens the doorway for entrepreneurs and business people to start really doing some neat service innovation, if you will.
Yeah, and Jim, we try to think of it through the concept of value, and a big part of the discussion that you set me on many years ago is this idea of co-creation of value. But we've tried to advance that a little bit and say, actually, what entrepreneurs do is facilitate value, but it's customers and consumers who actually create it. So I facilitate value by designing the doorknob and studying how people use it, but no value is created until the customer actually uses the doorknob and goes through the door, experiences the benefit.
Right.
Is that legitimate that we've advanced co-creation a little bit that way?
Well, yeah, it's about engagement. It's about the notion that the customer has to experience the benefit, value in use, value in context, right? Sometimes the doorknob can be a real pain in the butt if it's not opening, or if it's you're in a novel situation. But yeah, I think our understanding of value networks and is we have a little bit different terminology in service science. We talk about the service system, and in service dominant logic, we talk about resource integrators. So yeah, there is a bunch of terminology, and I should also mention that because there is some new terminology, we've started a professional association, a nonprofit professional association called ISIP, the International Society of Service Innovation Professionals, and there we get students can earn best paper awards by progressing the field. Faculty who teach, can get some additional resources, and even professionals who want to, be part of a professional association can win badges. And we also have a partnership with Business Expert Press for publishing books. We have a lot of professionals publish books. You, Hunter, you and Jeff Saperstein were, both faculty, so you taught courses, but you also have, books in the Business Expert Press series. So
yes, very proud of that.
So I think, there's obviously, depending on the perspective that you come at things, there's different terminology, and I think underneath it all, though, there's a particular way that you look at the world. And I think, what you just described of, providers and entrepreneurs facilitating the benefits that the customer experiences, obviously that's at the essence of it. And whether you call it value co-creation or value networks or customer experience or customer benefits, I mean, that's kind of secondary to, whether you're looking at the world differently or not, whether your paradigm, your mental model has shifted or not. And that's, I think, where, ISIP, service dominant logic, service science, for those who get deep into it, they really do experience, I think, this kind of aha moment where, okay, I see the world differently now. And that should open up ways of thinking about starting a business or creating new offerings in my existing business. It kind of gets you outside the box, if you will.
Yeah. One of the important areas, obviously, Jim, is the role of technology in service, which, again, 20 years ago, we didn't think about technology delivering service, right? But now you say, I'm quoting from a 2019 paper of yours with Daniel Pakala, and you said the future of service innovation is in technological agency. So we always think about entrepreneurs, especially as having agency. They can act to change the future. But you're talking about technological agency. The digital service will be defined as executed in full by a technical system. So let's go there a little bit and talk about the technical systems with agency.
Sure. Yeah. And Daniel Pakala, he's one of my colleagues from VTT in Finland. And for folks who don't know, Finland is a very, very innovative country, and they VTT is sort of like they're a 3,000 person research group, and they started a service science research group. And Daniel came and spent a year with me when we were looking at artificial intelligence, which is going to have a transformative effect on service. It's going to help it scale. You think of how many things in service offerings are limited by, the number of employees with certain skills that you can deploy. So certainly AI and technology is going to have a dramatic, impact on service innovation. But I should mention that service innovation can also be very much without technology. So we shouldn't get overly focused on technology driving service innovation, because business model innovation is equally important. In fact, if you look at all of the different types of innovation encompassed by service innovation, there's business models. How do you pay for something? How are employees recruited? Service innovation in government is also possible, and you can expect big disruptions that are coming in these future years as technological innovation in decision making, even innovation in taxation. All these things are going to be profoundly disrupted, not simply by technological innovation, although that's going to play a role. It really comes down to, this notion of service system as responsible entities interacting to co-create value. And that's going to be equally important, is the change in skills of people, the change in business models, the change in institutions. Institutional change is a huge thing that's going to be happening over the next few years.
A quick note. Did you know that we provide supplemental materials for each podcast? Listening to and understanding the key takeaways from our expert guests helps you think better about building a more beautiful business. Taking direct action and implementing these strategies is when the real work begins. Take a concrete, immediate step to implementing a better business model today by downloading the show notes and business tool we've created for this episode. Visit Mises.org/E4Bpod. That's MISES.org/E, the number 4, the letter B, POD, and click on today's episode. Now, back to our interview.
You mentioned service systems, Jim, and we might just drill down a little bit into what a service system is and how it's evolving. You also often use the modifier SMART with that term, a smart service system. So how does a service system get smart?
Yeah, so let's kind of, service systems are people, service systems are businesses, service systems are government. People offer service to each other, businesses offer service to each other, governments offer service to their citizens. So what we're just talking about is these responsible entities that are interacting, and you can call them value networks, service networks. But a smart is you're learning to use resources more efficiently. So technology certainly can be a big way to use resources more efficiently. But business models also can be a huge way to use resources more efficiently. If you think about Uber or Lyft, for example, somebody's got a car. Are they fully utilizing it? No. Okay, what can they do? And often fully utilizing a resource is just getting smarter, having more skills in people. So there's lots of ways we can use resources more efficiently, and that's what Smarter is primarily about. It's using less material, using less time, using less effort, using less space. Miniaturization is a fantastic way to use resources more efficiently. But we also talk about wiser service systems, and that is really thinking long term. So smart is like efficient use of resources, whereas wise is you are really thinking of, how is this going to impact future generations? There's some things that may be smart but not wise. And I can give an example if you want, but it's like cars, okay? Cars are great, in a way, right? We wouldn't have advanced as fast as we have if we didn't have cars. But compare the car to the bicycle. Like the bicycle requires less infrastructure. The bicycle makes you stronger as you use it. So in some ways, cars are great. In some ways, bicycles are great. But when you start understanding the distinction between smart and wise, you start looking at, more a bigger, it opens the lens and you start thinking about future generations. Like one of the, if we just have artificial intelligence that does things for us and we get dumber as a result, is that wise? No, it's not. So really, when you're designing the future as an entrepreneur, it's not just about making things easier for the customer, as much as that may sound counterintuitive. It's about making things better. It's like short-term benefits, long-term benefits. And if you can get a short-term benefit and a long-term benefit, that's going to have a bigger impact than just, short-term benefits. So we have to, when we start thinking about service systems, there's ethical considerations, but there's also, what we call the impact on future generations, potential for unintended consequences. Again, it's a different way of looking at smarter and wiser distinction, but that's something that we are encouraging a lot of research now in service science, this distinction, especially in the AI era, because there are so many benefits to be achieved, but let's do it wisely.
Yeah. Well, it's the longer time horizon, and that's to be encouraged. In fact, I give economics some kudos for that, because we do try to look at the longer time horizon, and actually that's tied up with ethics. That it's much more ethical to think in longer time horizons, to think wisely, as you put it, than short term. Another term, Jim, that we might investigate, and I would love to catch up, in fact, see how it's developing, is one of the ones you use at ISIP. You talk about cognitive mediators and cognitive assistants. They can empower employees and customers and citizens. You've mentioned that. It's tied up, I suppose, with cognitive computing. Can you give us just a quick overview of cognitive mediators and assistants and where that's going?
Sure. And again, I think if you're, an entrepreneur, you're probably thinking, okay, there's a progression, and right now we're into the, early stages of AI where, we have some cognitive tools, but, tools are one thing, but a cognitive assistant can do, tools typically do one thing. An assistant can do many things. So wouldn't it be great if we could move from cognitive tools to cognitive assistant? But then what comes after a cognitive assistant? Well, maybe you want a coach. So, a cognitive coach would help you do things better. And then maybe a collaborator, a cognitive collaborator would be AI-based. But, when I think of my best collaborator, it's somebody I argued with constantly, because we could make our ideas better because we saw the world differently. But when we could, argue it out, we could make progress. So cognitive collaborators are another type of innovation that's coming. And, IBM's investing a lot in debating technology, because, you want to have a good debate with your collaborator so you can improve ideas. But a cognitive mediator is kind of where we ultimately will get when two very profound things happen. And they're going to have a profound impact on service innovation, but it's also going to have a profound impact on, as I was saying earlier, institutions and all kinds of things. Because a cognitive mediator, to understand a cognitive mediator, you have to think, who do you trust to make decisions on your behalf? And most people would say, nobody, only me. I only trust myself. Other people, younger people, I've asked this question to young people, and they sometimes say, I trust my mom or my dad. They would make good decisions on my behalf. And sometimes, some people will say my significant other. I trust them to make good decisions on my behalf. But eventually there's going to come a point with artificial intelligence where we're going to pass cognitive tool, pass cognitive assistant, pass cognitive collaborator, pass cognitive coach. I'm talking now probably 20 years in the future, at least, maybe 40. You're going to have an AI that you trust to make decisions. And it's going to be because it can negotiate perhaps better than you can. But it's also going to be because, we have limited memory, but our cognitive mediators in some way will know us better than we know ourselves. Right now, a lot of innovators call this digital twins. You're going to have digital twins for people, just like you have a digital twin for a piece of equipment now or a building. You're going to have a digital twin for all responsible entities, all people, businesses, even governments will have digital twins. And their memory, just like we can't remember probably what we had for breakfast a year ago or who we met in a meeting 2 years ago, our cognitive mediators will. And that's it's going to have a profound impact on identity. It's going to have a profound impact on our ability to scale ourselves. And you can think of us getting there by all of the apps on your smartphone growing up. So we probably have hundreds of apps on our smartphone. And as they grow up and become our digital assistants, we're all going to be managers with hundreds of digital workers at our disposal. But I think cognitive mediator is going to really be profound. And so, again, this is, I think, partly wrapped up in service science as we think about, okay, what are the service innovations that are going to be possible as we have these new capabilities forward.
So trust gets us into an area of subjectivity and perhaps emotion. And that's an area that's difficult for, I think, a lot of people to understand about how technology can get there. And I was going to probe in the area of empathy. You and I have talked about empathy a lot, Jim. We think of entrepreneurs having empathy as a skill. They can try to understand how another will feel about a value proposition, and that's part of the entrepreneurial skill set. So will the cognitive mediator be capable of empathy?
Great question. Empathy is a big part of our skill set for service innovators, service scientists. We talk about them being T-shaped, and T-shaped, as you've written about with Jeff and others, is, you've got depth and breadth. And IDEO, the design company, they called the breadth part empathy. And I do think that the ability to put yourself in another person's shoes is how we would describe it, right? When a good entrepreneur can see the opportunity in the struggles of another, right? The pain, the struggles of another. You have a lot of empathy, and this is kind of like that, service dominant logic, service science lens. When you start looking at the world as service systems, you start noticing all the problems they're running into, all these responsible entities bumping into problem here, problem there. And that infinite opportunity for entrepreneurs and innovators once you start seeing the world that way. And empathy certainly helps unlock your ability to see all of those opportunities. I think the way to think about it in terms of artificial intelligence and cognitive mediators is in terms of digital twins. As we get better and better models of service systems, how much access do we get to those models? And, that's a trust kind of thing because, let's think about Facebook for a minute, or Google, or Amazon. I think it was like 15 years ago, I would say, in some ways, Amazon knows me. And this is 15 years ago. I would say, in some ways, Amazon knows me better than my mother. And people would say, what are you talking about? And I'd say, well, when it comes to buying my next book, Amazon is predicting about 1/3 of the time the next book I'm going to buy. And it's offering it to me and I'm buying it. And, that is because they built a model of me. And as you build models of lots of people, you can build better models of any particular individual. So as we go into the future where we have these AI models for all responsible entities, We'll have an AI model for IBM. We'll have an IBM model for Hunter. Facebook, depending on which social media things you use. I use Amazon a lot, Facebook a little, Twitter a lot. These organizations that have access to my data are building digital twins of me for particular purposes. Irene Ng, she's part of the service science effort. She's been a faculty. She's an entrepreneur now for companies called DataSwift. And she is really taking the idea of building a digital twin for yourself and monetizing it to a whole new level. And so I think there's fantastic opportunities for entrepreneurs who understand service science, who understand this roadmap and progression to the cognitive mediators, which will have a profound impact on value co-creation, to start seeing lots and lots of different opportunities. It comes down to, you can relate it to empathy, but, technologically it's a digital twin.
Mm-hmm.
As we get cognitive mediators, we'll have better digital twins of ourselves. Think of, writing your, trust or your will, at some point, and it's coming, maybe a few decades away, but, you having that conversation, they say, okay, who do you want to be the trustee when you're no longer here? And I was joking with somebody working on our trust, and I said, I want my cognitive mediator to be my trustee. And they said, what? But anyway, you get my point. This is going to be very profound and have very, very profound consequences. But our ability to have empathy for others, just like, you watch a good movie, right? You watch a good movie about some other group that you didn't really think about very much, and you maybe get better empathy because you have a better model of them. And with artificial intelligence, we're going to have superb models of all kinds of things that we do not have models of now. And these superb models can be used by a coach. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to create an innovation, you'll have your coach saying, I'm tapping into the best digital models I can of this potential customer of yours. And, here's 16 other opportunities, and here's 32 other people who've been thinking about this. You might want to, catch up with their YouTubes and, get to know them, and maybe you can brainstorm together. Maybe they could become part of your. And I think that's going to be one of the big things. Today, you think of serial entrepreneurs, but when we have cognitive mediators, we're all going to be parallel entrepreneurs. We're all going to be managing 100 digital workers as our smartphones grow up. And we're going to have this ability to do multiple innovations in parallel. So it is definitely, we're on the verge, I think, of, profound change. And this is why we have to be wise and not just smart.
Mm-hmm.
To get these bigger benefits, we don't want to go about it stupidly. We want to go about it wisely, and that's why we need service science, and that's why we need ethical AI, and why we need a lot of things we have to think about more deeply.
Just to be clear, that the model that the cognitive mediator will create of me and others will include my mental model. Is that right? And then will my mental model change as a result of interacting with the mediator?
Sure. I mean, only because IBM is so big into trusted AI, and I'm constantly seeing customers, insurance companies and financial institutions and governments saying, hey, we want to be able to trust our AI. We want it to be fair. We want it to be explainable. We want it to be secure. We're getting these kind of requests constantly from our customers here at IBM. But because of that, I think, I'm very attuned to the fact that we all have biases, right? And our cognitive mediator is in some ways going to know our biases better than we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that day is coming. And, it's if we're wise about it, it's going to be like, imagine the world when nobody could read and write, right? That was one world. Some people might say, oh, it had certain benefits. But now in a world where we can all read and write, that creates fabulous new opportunities for value co-creation. So imagine a world where people actually know themselves and their biases much better than they do. And people have perhaps more empathy. People are able to, this could be big, is like we've got such poor tools for, running governments. We've got such poor tools for looking into the future. I mean, it's really, predictive maintenance, simple models of
Mhm.
predicting the future. But, if you read Brian Arthur's work,
Complexity
complexity
economics.
economics,
Yeah.
yeah, you start seeing, wow,
Hmm.
we can run a million possible simulations with digital twin models. He calls them the strategies of the entities,
Right.
right? So we got these systems with millions and billions of entities changing their strategy constantly every day, updating it. And of course, any one run is just one run. So you need to do billions and trillions of runs, and you start to see patterns. You start to see, wow, if everybody's strategy started shifting this way, this would be, hugely beneficial. So I think we're, at this juncture. I mean, and we always are, right? Throughout history, the steam engine, everything, computers, there's always this possibility to go in many, many directions in the future. And I think with, service science as a foundation, service dominant logic, understanding cognitive mediators and artificial intelligence and trust and service and empathy, all of these are wise versus smart. I think all of these are elements, complexity economics of how we can create a better future for entrepreneurs and innovators. And that's to me, that's the trajectory we're all on. Is what do you do in the future when the AI systems can take care of the basic stuff? Well, it becomes open to our aspirations, right? Are we creating bigger aspirations for us? And there's things one person can do, but there's things that like at IBM, we like to think about what can 100,000 people do, what can 300,000 people do, and what are the innovations that it takes 300,000 people to do.
Yeah.
What about 300,000 people with 100 digital workers each?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We shouldn't be thinking of mundane, trivial things. We have to get aspirations that are higher. And so I'd say empathy is going to be an important skill, but I would also say raising our aspirational level to wiser innovations. That's definitely another thing that I think is,
Yeah.
it's like reading and writing. Reading and writing, those are basic skills that have helped us. Skills around empathy, service science, and higher aspirations with better tools. Those will open a lot of doors we don't have right now.
One of the things that Brian Arthur writes about, Jim, is the property of complex adaptive systems is emergence, meaning that we can't predict what that outcome will be. So that's part of the vision, right? Is emergence. We don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And that's Steve Vargo from Service Dominant Logic. He's also looking at emergence and the various simulations he's thinking about. And but he's also very, very interested in institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He would like to create, not just entrepreneurs who are like in the commercial space, but like, government and institutional entrepreneurs.
Right.
And so, yep,
God
absolutely. Yeah. Emergence can be very powerful.
Yeah.
And change things radically. And with some of these new tools, maybe we'll be able to look at that. And the other thing besides artificial intelligence that's going to have a big impact is the virtual world, augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain for trust, new energy systems, biological innovations. So there's a whole host of things that are going to be fertile ground for the technology-driven entrepreneurs. But I think, we're also with service science, service dominant logic, we're looking at, the changes in our individual skill sets and mindsets, and that can have a profound impact in institutions as well. So,
yeah. I'm sorry. I also love your concept of the augmented individual. As we think of ourselves as individuals, we can be tremendously augmented by all of this technology and service systems and collaboration and cognitive mediators. We should think of ourselves as augmentable. Our best selves are going to become better.
Absolutely. And I think that's really the key thing right there is what is the goal? Well, it's to be a better future version of yourself. So in a sense, our biggest co-creation partner, is ourselves in the future.
Yeah.
Think of your future self as your customer. You're the provider today, and you're making decisions, but you're trying to make your customer, the future you, better. So how does that impact the decisions you make every day? And it's definitely, there's been a few of the researchers in this field. I think Richard Norman, in his wonderful book, How the Map Changes the Landscape. I'm forgetting the title of it, but anyway, he writes a lot about co-creation of value with your future self, and businesses do that, right? Your IBM wants to be a better future version of itself. Countries do that. U.S. wants to be a better future version of itself. Finland, all of these countries want to be better future versions of themselves. People. So again, these are responsible entities, service system entities, and that's an interesting way to look at it, is trying to become a better future version of yourself. And the augmented you is interesting because Doug Lennett, who did the Psych Project, has been working on common sense reasoning for AI. He's got a great article in AI Magazine about virtual immortality, which says once you have these digital twins of yourself and your augmented self, in some sense, it does give you this virtual immortality. So people in the future will be able to have a conversation with a grandparent. So yeah, lots of interesting possibilities there. But it's here we are today, right? You're an entrepreneur today. You're a business person today. Sure, it helps to maybe have some of these ideas about the future, but what are you going to do today? And what if you're at the beginning of this, what if your revenue is falling, like IBM in the early 90s? IBM right now, we've got a revenue growth problem that we're addressing. So to kind of reel it back to home, we think increasingly it's about the platform that you're creating, the ecosystems you're creating. So it's not just the offering you're creating, but what's the platform? What's the ecosystem? How are you creating new customers? That's the challenge that we constantly come back to is that.
Yep. Well, Jim, one last question, which is in a slightly different direction, although it might be a service system question. You've done a lot historically in building a bridge, I call it, or making a connection between universities and business. You talk about IBM inventing computer science and helping the universities create departments and academic disciplines there, and you've done the same with service science. We try to do that in taking economic theory from the university side and figuring out how it applies to business and building that bridge that way from theory to practice. What's your experience of how to make that connection between the academics and business, how to make it work best, how to make it more productive, how to make it the best it can be? What can you distill that history for us a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely, in my role for IBM, leading global university programs, traveled to like 45 different countries, I think, in 5 years, visiting universities, meeting with faculty, and making sure, we were giving, I think we gave 300,000 faculty and students worldwide access to our, Watson in the cloud. So definitely we, at IBM and in my role, spent a lot of time helping universities, understand, okay, here's the courses, here's the skills that we need for upskilling, students. And oh, by the way, it's not just enough to learn this knowledge, but, they have to have some sort of entrepreneurial experience working on multidisciplinary teams to become T-shaped. So I think, this pandemic has really accelerated the digital transformation of universities. And I think my colleague Dick Larson, he's at MIT. He's kind of post-tenure now. He's at that stage, but he he likes this idea that, lifelong learning is what it's about, especially in these times of accelerated change. So he proposes, his big idea, which I like a lot, is that when you graduate from MIT or, Georgia Tech or, Emory or, whatever it is, whatever university you graduate from, you will be able to, your employer who wants you to be upskilling, if you're an employee, will pay for you to, get additional certifications in new and emerging areas that could potentially help your business. I think, certainly at IBM, we know the best way to keep our employees engaged is they feel like they're learning constantly, they're being challenged and learning. Entrepreneurs kind of do that for themselves, but as an employee in a large corporation, it's engagement is all about, and performance is all about this continuous, growth and learning. So I think, my view is that, a lot of people say, oh, universities are going to go away. I totally disagree. I think universities are going to be, they're responsible entities, they're service systems, and they play a very important local role. Some, are trying to be more global, but I think, the local role that universities play are that, it's fantastic. You don't have to go very far to find a university. Every major city has a university, and in that university, you're going to find experts who have deep knowledge in lots and lots of different areas. And I think that's the true benefit of, having expertise and knowledge local. And a lot of innovations can be tried out in a university context first before it goes global. For example, Facebook, right? Facebook started as something that universities were piloting, and hopped from university to university around the world. I see a lot of innovations like that. Certainly a lot of the innovations coming out of augmented and virtual reality, I think, can skip from university to university as well. And creating, I would like to see it that you can't graduate from a university until you've started your first company. So I'd like to see everybody who graduates from university has at least one company under their belt. And I think, I'll be talking to Linnaeus University in Sweden in the coming weeks, and they and several universities in Sweden, really try to, emphasize that. They really say, we want to make sure all our students have the opportunity to start a company before they graduate. You go to these universities and you find a real large emphasis on, giving students the opportunity to try their hand at entrepreneurship. And I think, just one last thing about universities. To me, it's like, you're in your family, right? You grow up as a kid, you're in your family, whatever form your family takes, there's many forms. And then, you kind of grow up and you go to university, and that's where you meet your next kind of level of brothers and sisters and family. It becomes a safe place before you're thrown into the quote unquote real world to have some of the things are similar to like it was when you were in your family. So from my perspective, that innovation of giving a staging area for the next generation to maybe meet their spouse, maybe meet their, start developing, their first startup. These are important things that universities do. And I, for one, think, universities have a bright future if they can reinvent themselves to serve their customers better than they do now.
Good. Well, Jim, we must end there for time, I'm afraid, but we thank you. You've given us amazing insights into the future potential. You've made us think, and you've urged us on to greater aspirations. So there's nothing better than that. We thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Hunter. It's been my pleasure.
Economics for Business is a production of the Mises Institute. To explore more content like this, visit Mises.org. And for more from Hunter Hastings, visit hunterhastings.com.